the laptop. That's what brought me home. A stupid PowerPoint presentation for the Meridian account sitting on my nightstand because I'd been reviewing it at 5 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Christine had still been in bed, warm and soft, and I'd kissed her forehead before leaving. She'd murmured something that sounded like, "Love you," without opening her eyes. 11 hours later, I watched her arch her back beneath my business partner. I should back up, explain who I am, what I built, what I thought I had. My name is Grant Holloway, 38 years old, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. I came home with all my limbs, most of my hearing, and enough nightmares to keep a therapist employed for years. I didn't see a therapist. I started a company instead. Sentinel Shield Security, executive protection, corporate consulting, threat assessment. I built it from nothing. Well, almost nothing. Neil Ashford's father provided the seed money, $500,000 in exchange for Neil getting a 35% stake. I did the work. Neil did the schmoozing. For 6 years, it worked. 47 employees. Contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. A pending government bid worth $4.2 million. A house in Cherry Creek North that Christine had decorated with the same careful attention she brought to her freelance design clients. 9 years of marriage, 11 years together. I thought I knew her the way I knew my own reflection. The drive home that Tuesday was unremarkable. October in Denver. The aspens turning gold in the mountains, the air carrying that first hint of winter bite. I was thinking about the presentation, running through the talking points in my head. The Meridian meeting was at 2. I had time. My black F-150 turned onto our street at 11:38 a.m. Christine's white Lexus sat in the driveway, which was normal. She worked from home most days, meeting clients at their properties or at showrooms. The silver BMW parked 50 yards down the street was not normal. I knew that car. Neil drove it with the same casual arrogance he brought to everything, leaning back in the leather seat, one hand on the wheel, always looking like he belonged wherever he was. I'd ribbed him about it once, called it his trust fund chariot. He'd laughed and said at least he didn't drive a truck that screamed, "overcompensating." That was Neil. Quick with a joke, quick with everything. The BMW wasn't in my driveway. It was parked down the street, partially obscured by the Henderson's overgrown hedge. If you weren't looking for it, you might not notice it. I was always looking. The Marines taught me that. Assess your environment. Note what's out of place. Trust your instincts before your assumptions. I sat in my truck for 45 seconds. Engine running. Hands on the wheel. My heart rate didn't change. My breathing stayed steady. That's the thing about combat training. It doesn't just prepare you for war. It prepares you for any moment when your world might collapse. My mind was already running through explanations. Maybe Neil had stopped by to pick up documents. Maybe Christine had asked him to look at a security concern at the house. Maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation for why my business partner's car was parked 50 yards from my driveway in the middle of a Tuesday. But innocent people don't hide their cars. I turned off the engine. I got out. I walked to my front door. The key slid into the lock the way it had 1,000 times before. The door swung open the way it always had. Nothing about this moment felt different from any other homecoming, except everything was about to change. The house was quiet. Christine usually had music playing when she worked, soft jazz or acoustic covers of pop songs. The silence pressed against my ears as I stepped inside. I stood in the foyer, listening. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The grandfather clock I'd inherited from my father ticked in the living room. From upstairs, a sound, muffled, rhythmic. My feet moved before my mind caught up. Up the stairs. Each step deliberate, the way I'd been trained to clear buildings. Not rushing. Not hesitating. just moving with purpose toward whatever waited. The bedroom door was open 3 inches. Through the gap, I could see the foot of our bed. The sheets tangled. A man's foot. Pale. The ankle surprisingly delicate for a man's build. I pushed the door open. Christine was on her back, blonde hair spread across the pillow I'd slept on that morning. Her eyes were closed, her lips parted, her face wearing an expression I recognized from our own intimate moments, except I wasn't the one causing it. Neil Ashford knelt above her, his back to the door, his hips moving with the kind of confidence that comes from repetition, from practice, from doing something so many times it becomes routine. They didn't hear me at first. The door swung silently on its hinges. Christine had insisted on oiling them last month because the squeaking annoyed her. I stood there for 5 seconds. Maybe 10. Long enough to watch my entire life restructure itself around this single, immutable fact. Then Christine opened her eyes and saw me. The scream she let out wasn't fear. It was something worse. Surprise and shame and a kind of desperate calculation, all compressed into a single note of human anguish. Neil spun around so fast he nearly fell off the bed. His face went through about 6 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, terror. And then, this is the part I'll never forget, a brief flash of something that looked almost like relief. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. Grant. He said my name like it was a foreign word. Grant, listen. You have 20 minutes. My voice came out flat, emotionless. The same tone I'd used to give orders under fire. Then I'm calling the police for trespassing. The house is in my name. Christine was scrambling for the sheets, trying to cover herself, as if modesty mattered now, as if anything mattered now. Grant, please, she started. 18 minutes. Neil held up his hands, palms out, like he was trying to calm a wild animal. Okay, let's talk about this like adults. This doesn't have to. 17 minutes and 45 seconds. Grant, come on. Neil's voice took on a wheedling quality I'd never heard before. We've been friends for how long? Partners for 6 years. You can't just, I can do whatever I want. It's my house. You have 17 minutes to get out of it before I call the police. I pulled out my phone, held it up so he could see the screen. Or I can call them now. Your choice. Neil's face went pale. He started grabbing for his clothes, pulling on his pants with shaking hands. Christine was still frozen, clutching the sheets to her chest like a shield. This isn't what you think, she whispered. Really? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Because what I think is that my wife has been sleeping with my business partner. Is that not what's happening? She couldn't answer. Her silence said everything. I turned my back on them. I didn't trust myself to keep looking. Not because I might cry. I was beyond tears, somewhere in a cold space where tears couldn't reach. But because some part of me, the part forged in Fallujah, wanted to close the distance between me and Neil Ashford and break him into pieces. I wouldn't do that. I wasn't that man. But standing there, with the sound of them fumbling for clothes behind me, I understood for the first time how I could have been. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. I remember being distantly proud of that. First call, Victor Reyes. Former JAG lawyer, now one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in Denver. We'd served together briefly. He'd handled a legal matter for my unit, and we'd stayed in touch. Good guy. Vicious in court. Victor, it's Grant. I need you to file for divorce today. Adultery. I have the evidence I need. I paused, listening to his sharp intake of breath. And pull up our prenuptial agreement, specifically Section 7, the infidelity clause. Grant, what? Are you sure? What happened? I'm looking at it right now. Or I was. They're getting dressed behind me. A long pause. I'll have paperwork ready by end of business. Don't do anything else. Don't touch anything. Don't threaten anyone. Just get out of there and come to my office. Understood. One more call to make first. I hung up and dialed Douglas Ashford. Neil's father was old money, the kind of Denver wealth that came from mining claims and railroad investments 3 generations back. He'd believed in his son's potential the way fathers often believe in sons who haven't earned it. When Neil pitched Sentinel Shield, my concept, my business plan, my expertise, Douglas had seen an opportunity to give his directionless 30-year-old a purpose. I'd been grateful at the time. I'd needed the capital. I thought I was getting a partner. Douglas, it's Grant Holloway. I'm standing in my bedroom. Behind me, I heard Christine sob. Neil was saying something in a low, urgent voice. Your son was in my bed with my wife. I'm giving you until 5 p.m. today. I buy out Neil's share at fair market value, or we handle this in court, publicly. Your choice. The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. Grant. Douglas's voice was hoarse. Grant, are you certain? I watched them, Douglas. I'm certain. Another pause. Then, quietly, I'll call you before 5. I hung up. Christine had managed to find her robe. She was standing now, mascara running down her cheeks, her hands shaking as she tried to tie the sash. Neil had pulled on his pants and was holding his shirt in front of him like a shield. Grant, please. Christine took a step toward me. We can talk about this. It's not what you think. Don't touch me. I stepped back, keeping distance between us. Your things will be at your mother's house by this evening. Leave your keys on the table. Grant, I have a meeting at 2. I need my laptop. I walked past them to the closet where I'd left my bag. The laptop was right where I'd left it, sitting on the shelf next to Christine's collection of designer handbags. I grabbed it, shoved it in my bag, and walked out. Neither of them tried to stop me. I was almost to my truck when I realized I'd forgotten something. Not forgotten, noticed. As I'd passed Neil's pile of clothes, I'd seen his phone on the dresser, screen lit up with a notification. The message preview showed the first few words. Did you get the security codes yet? We need... The sender was listed as J. Walsh. I didn't go back. I didn't confront Neil about it. I filed it away in the same mental compartment where I stored tactical information during combat. Something to investigate later. Something that might change the shape of this disaster. I got in my truck. I drove to my office. I didn't look back. Sentinel Shield's headquarters occupied the 3rd floor of a glass and steel building in the Denver Tech Center. We'd moved there 2 years ago when we outgrew our original space, a cramped suite in a tired office park. I'd been proud of the upgrade. It felt like validation. Now it just felt like a crime scene I hadn't finished processing. I parked in my reserved spot at 1:30 p.m. The Meridian meeting was supposed to start in 30 minutes. I walked into the building, rode the elevator up, and stepped into the reception area. Mr. Holloway. Our receptionist, Tyler, looked up with his usual professional smile. I thought you were coming in later for the Meridian. Cancel it. Family emergency. I kept walking toward my office. And tell Rachel Torres I need her in my office in 5 minutes. Rachel was waiting in 3. She was 42, former Army intelligence, built like a marathon runner and just as relentless. She'd been with Sentinel Shield since year 2, back when we were 4 people in a dream. I trusted her more than I trusted anyone except my own instincts. Close the door, I said. She did, then stood at attention, an old habit from her Army days that surfaced whenever she sensed something serious. Neil is out, as of today. I need you to lock his computer access, change all system passwords, and pull the last 6 months of his login records. Do it quietly. Rachel's face didn't change. That was one of the things I valued about her. She didn't waste time with unnecessary questions when action was needed. Time frame on the records? Hour would be nice. 2 if you need it. I'll have it in 45 minutes. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Grant, is this about what I think it's about? I looked at her. What do you think it's about? I think Neil Ashford has been acting squirrely for the past 4 months, taking long lunches, leaving early, asking questions about client accounts that weren't his responsibility. She met my eyes. I think something's been wrong for a while, and today you found out what? You never said anything. I didn't have proof, and I know how close you were. She shook her head. We're being the operative word, apparently. I'll have those records for you within the hour. Rachel, she stopped. What else did you notice? Anything at all? She was quiet for a moment, her jaw working the way it did when she was sorting through information. He asked me last month about our encryption protocols, said he was updating his own records, wanted to make sure he understood the technical side. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough. And now? Now I think he was taking notes for someone else. She let out a long breath. I'm sorry, Grant. I should have trusted my gut. Your gut kept you alive in Kandahar. We'll trust it from now on. She nodded and left. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began systematically pulling apart the life I'd thought I had. Jay Walsh. James Walsh. CEO of Meridian Defense Solutions. It took me 20 minutes to make the connection. Meridian was our competitor, smaller than us, but aggressive. They'd been trying to poach our clients for years. I'd never taken them seriously as a threat. But Neil had been taking them seriously. Very seriously. Rachel's login records showed the pattern. Over the past 4 months, Neil had accessed files he had no business touching. Client contracts, security protocols, personnel records. The kind of information a competitor would pay good money for. And the lunches. Rachel's instincts had been right. Neil had marked them on his calendar as client development. But when I cross-referenced the dates with Christine's calendar, she'd shared it with me years ago, and I'd never bothered to remove the access. I found something interesting. Every time Neil had a client lunch, Christine had blocked out the same hours for site visits. Every single time. They'd been coordinating for 18 months based on what I could piece together. 18 months of shared calendars and careful alibis and a betrayal so methodical it must have felt like a second job. Douglas Ashford called at 4:45 p.m. Grant. His voice sounded older than I remembered, heavier. I've spoken with Neil and with my attorney. And I'll buy out his share. Fair market value. We can bring in an independent assessor, but I'm thinking somewhere around 1.8 million. Paid over 18 months. He paused. That's what I can do without liquidating assets I'd rather not touch. 18 months. The same length of time they'd been sneaking around. There was a poetry to it that I appreciated. That works. I'll have Victor draw up the paperwork. Grant. Douglas cleared his throat. I won't defend what he did. He's my son, but he's not the man I raised. Whatever else you find, and I suspect you'll find plenty, I don't want to know. Just don't destroy him publicly. Please. I thought about the Jay Walsh texts, the client files Neil had accessed, the coordinated calendars. That depends entirely on what else I find, Douglas. He didn't argue. We both knew he had no ground to stand on. I'd hired a moving crew, bonded, insured, professional, to pack Christine's belongings. Nothing vindictive, nothing petty. Just her clothes, her personal items, her grandmother's jewelry box, the artwork she'd brought into the marriage. Everything was delivered to her mother's house in Lakewood by 7 p.m. Patricia Webb called me at 8:30. Grant? Her voice was thick with something that might have been tears. Grant, I don't know what to say. She's here. She's a mess. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm sorry. Thank you, Patricia. I meant it. Christine's mother had always treated me like a son. That wasn't Christine's fault, and it wasn't something I'd punish. I always respected you. This doesn't change that. She wants to explain. She's been calling you 14 times. I know. I looked at my phone, at the list of ignored calls. I don't have anything to say to her right now. Maybe not ever. But that's between me and her. Patricia sighed. You're a good man, Grant. Better than she deserved, apparently. I'm sorry my daughter couldn't see that. We said our goodbyes. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat in my empty house, surrounded by the furniture Christine had picked out. The paintings she'd arranged on the walls, the throw pillows she'd insisted made the couch look more inviting. At 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check Neil's cloud storage. Password is Christine's birthday. Backward. You need to see what's there. I stared at the message for a long time, then I opened my laptop and started typing. Christine's birthday, June 15th, 1988. 06151988. Backward. 88915160. The password worked. Neil's cloud storage was a digital shrine to his betrayal. Hundreds of photos, organized into folders with the kind of meticulous care that suggested obsession. Neil and Christine in Aspen, dated December of last year, when she'd told me she was visiting her college friend in Seattle. Neil and Christine in Cabo San Lucas, February, during her supposed design conference in San Francisco. 18 months of lies, documented in high resolution. But the photos weren't the worst of it. The financial records were worse. Neil had been skimming from Sentinel Shield. Small amounts, $500 here, $800 there, buried in expense reports and petty cash reconciliations. Nothing that would trigger an audit on its own. But over 18 months, the total came to nearly $47,000. And then there were the emails. James Walsh wanted Neil to bring him Sentinel Shield's client list, security protocols, and, critically, the details of our government contract bid. In exchange, Meridian would make Neil a vice president with a guaranteed salary of $300,000 plus bonuses. Neil had agreed. The partnership paperwork was already drafted, dated 3 weeks ago, unsigned but ready. One email to Christine, sent at 2 a.m. on a night I'd been traveling. Once the Meridian deal closes, we'll have enough to start fresh in Scottsdale. Grant will never know what hit him. This is our chance, baby. Our fresh start. I read that email 4 times. Then I closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, and threw up. The anonymous tip had come from a number I didn't recognize, but numbers can be traced if you know the right people. I knew the right people. By Wednesday afternoon, I had a name. Ashley Ashford, Neil's younger sister. 29 years old, working as a paralegal in Boulder. I met her at a coffee shop on Pearl Street, far enough from Denver that we wouldn't be recognized. She was waiting when I arrived, sharp-featured, dark-haired, with Neil's eyes but none of his smug confidence. Mr. Holloway, she stood as I approached. Thank you for meeting me. You sent the text. I did. She sat back down, wrapping both hands around a mug of tea. I know what you're thinking. Why would I betray my own brother? The thought crossed my mind. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what the funny thing is? If Neil had been different, if he'd ever shown me one moment of genuine loyalty or affection, I probably wouldn't be here. But that's not who he is. That's never been who he is. Tell me. 2 years ago, there was a dispute over our grandmother's trust. My father decided Neil deserved a larger share because he was building something with Sentinel Shield, while I was Just a paralegal. Her voice was bitter but controlled. I wasn't asking for equal shares. I just wanted what Grandma had promised me. Neil didn't fight for me. He didn't even pretend to fight for me. He took the money and told me I should be grateful for what I got. So this is revenge. This is justice. She leaned forward, her eyes blazing. My brother is a narcissist who destroys everything he touches. He was going to destroy your company, your marriage, your reputation, and he was going to do it while smiling and calling you buddy. I couldn't let him get away with it. I studied her. She didn't flinch. What else do you know? I know he's been bragging to certain people, our cousin, an old fraternity brother, that he had Grant's wife and would have his company by Christmas. Her lip curled. Exact words. I have the texts if you need them. He actually said that? Word for word. My cousin showed me. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through it, and turned the screen toward me. There it was, in Neil's characteristic casual tone. By Christmas, I'll have everything Grant built. His wife, his company, his clients. He has no idea. It's almost too easy. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not just anger, a kind of grim satisfaction. Every piece of evidence, every revelation made what came next easier, cleaner, more justified. I might need those texts. I'll forward you everything. She put her phone away. Why help me? What do you want out of this? I want to watch him fail. She said it simply, without drama. I want him to lose everything the way I lost my inheritance. And I want him to know that someone saw through him. That's enough for me. I believed her. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I'd spent enough years reading people to recognize genuine hatred when I saw it. Ashley Ashford hated her brother with the particular intensity that only family can generate. All right, I said. You've got yourself an alliance. Victor Reyes's office was on the 16th floor of a building downtown, with views of the mountains that probably cost an extra $1,000 a month. He'd earned every penny of his fees over the years, and I was about to need every bit of his expertise. The prenup is ironclad. Victor spread the documents across his desk. Section 7 is clear. Proven infidelity by either party results in forfeiture of spousal support, any claim to business assets acquired during the marriage, and 60% of marital property. So Christine gets her personal belongings, her vehicle, and $25,000 in liquid assets, less than 5% of your combined net worth. He looked up at me. You were smart to insist on that clause, Grant. A lot of people think prenups are pessimistic. I tell them they're realistic. What about Neil? The corporate theft is enough for criminal charges, but $47,000 is borderline. Prosecutors might not want to bother with a case that small, especially if he pays it back. Victor tapped the Meridian documents. The corporate espionage angle is harder to prove without showing actual damages, but the civil exposure is significant. I don't want him in prison. Victor raised an eyebrow. Prison would give him an excuse, I explained. Poor Neil, victim of a vindictive ex-partner. I want him destroyed professionally. I want everyone to know he failed on his own merits. Victor smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. That I can help you with. Christine showed up at the house Wednesday night. I hadn't changed the locks yet. That was scheduled for Thursday. And she still had her key. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. For a moment, muscle memory kicked in. That's Christine, home from a client meeting. She'll want a glass of wine and she'll tell me about her day. Then I remembered what day it was. She found me standing by the counter, a glass of water in my hand, watching her approach with the same analytical detachment I'd use to assess a potential threat. Grant. Her eyes were red, her face puffy. She'd been crying for 2 days straight, apparently. Grant, please, I need to talk to you. Then talk. It wasn't supposed to happen. She stopped a few feet away, like she was afraid to get closer. Neil, he pursued me. I was lonely. You were always working, always traveling. So this is my fault? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I was vulnerable and he took advantage. For 18 months. I kept my voice flat. You were vulnerable for 18 months. You were so lonely that you took trips to Aspen and Cabo with him. You were so neglected that you coordinated your calendars to make sure you could sneak around behind my back. She flinched. How do you know about... I know everything, Christine. The cloud storage, the photos, the emails. I set down my water glass. You want to know what hurts most? It's not the betrayal. People betray each other all the time. It's that you were so methodical about it, so organized, like cheating on your husband was just another item on your to-do list. Grant, you had 18 months to tell me you were lonely. 18 months to suggest counseling, to ask me to change, to do anything other than climb into bed with my business partner. You made your choice 547 days ago. I'm making mine now. She was crying again. Part of me wanted to comfort her. 9 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, and despite everything, some part of me still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with. But that woman had made her choice. And so had I. Don't I get a chance to explain? She whispered. You had 18 minutes. You used them getting dressed. I moved toward the door, guiding her out without touching her. Goodbye, Christine. She stopped in the doorway, turning back. Her face was streaked with tears, but there was something else in her expression. Something that looked almost like fear. You don't know everything, Grant. Neil isn't who you think he is. There are things... She stopped, shook her head. Never mind. You wouldn't believe me anyway. Try me. But she just shook her head again and walked out into the night. I watched her drive away, then called a locksmith for a morning appointment. The security industry in Denver is small. The veteran community is smaller. Word travels fast. I didn't launch a smear campaign against Neil Ashford. I didn't need to. I simply told the truth to a few key people and let nature take its course. Colonel Benjamin Hayes was the first call. He'd been my commanding officer during my second tour, a hard man with a reputation for absolute integrity. Now he ran a security firm in Colorado Springs that competed with ours for government contracts. Ben, I need to tell you something about Neil Ashford. I gave him the summary. The affair, the corporate theft, the Meridian deal. He listened without interrupting. That's a hell of a thing, Grant. His voice was heavy. I always thought there was something slick about that kid, but I never figured him for a snake. I'm buying him out. He's done at Sentinel Shield. Good. I'll make sure the right people know to be careful around Meridian and around Neil Ashford. He paused. You know what burns me? I was at your wedding, sat in the third row. Listened to that smooth-talking piece of work give a speech about brotherhood and loyalty. I remember. You should have seen the look on his face when he gave that toast. Smug as all get out. At the time, I thought he was just proud of you. Now I'm thinking he was proud of himself for pulling one over on everyone. That sounds about right. Colonel Hayes let out a long breath. Listen, I know men who've gone through what you're going through. Some of them handled it well. Some of them didn't. The ones who didn't, they let the anger eat them up. Became someone they weren't. I'm not going to become someone I'm not. I know you won't. You're too stubborn for that. A hint of warmth crept into his voice. But you doing okay? Really? I'm managing. That's not what I asked. I thought about it. I'll be okay, Ben. Eventually. Right now, I've got a company to run and a divorce to finalize. That's enough to keep me focused. Fair enough? Call me if you need anything. And Grant. He hesitated. You did this right. A lot of men would have done something stupid. You kept your head. Marine training. Something like that. Take care of yourself. The next call was to Frank Dennison, who ran security for 3 of the major oil companies in the state. Then Mike Rizzo, former Secret Service, now consulting for tech firms. Then 2 more contacts and 2 more after that. By Friday, word had spread through the veteran-heavy security industry like wildfire. Not gossip, just facts, shared quietly among professionals who valued integrity and despised those who lacked it. James Walsh called me Friday morning. I'd been expecting it. Mr. Holloway. His voice was smooth, professional. I understand there's been some upheaval at Sentinel Shield. Word travels fast. It does in our industry. He cleared his throat. I want you to know that Meridian Defense Solutions had no knowledge of Mr. Ashford's personal circumstances. Our discussions with him were purely professional. Professional discussions about stealing my clients and proprietary information. A pause. Mr. Holloway. I have the emails, Walsh. I have the draft partnership agreement. I have everything. I let that sink in. Now, you can keep pretending this was a legitimate business opportunity gone wrong, or you can admit that you were trying to poach my employees and my clients through corporate espionage. Your choice. The line was silent for a long moment. What do you want? I want you to stay away from my company, my clients, and my people. I want you to terminate any discussions with Neil Ashford, now and permanently. And I want you to remember that I have enough documentation to make your life very uncomfortable if you ever come after Sentinel Shield again. That sounds like a threat. It's a promise. I hung up. Neil called that evening, his voice tight with desperation. You're destroying my career over a mistake. You made choices for 18 months. Now you live with them. I was in my home office, going through financials, keeping my voice as flat as I could manage. The buyout paperwork is with your father. Sign it by Monday, or I file criminal charges for the $47,000 you stole, and I go public with everything. You don't know what I would do, Neil. You never did. That's why you thought you could get away with this. Grant, listen to me. His voice dropped, taking on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. I messed up. I know that. But Christine, she came on to me, okay? I was weak, I admit it, but she... Stop. The word came out harder than I intended. Don't you dare try to put this on her. You were my partner, my friend. You stood next to me at my wedding and gave a speech about loyalty and brotherhood. And then you spent 18 months stabbing me in the back. Both of you made choices. Both of you are going to live with the consequences. Grant, sign the papers. You have until Monday. I hung up before he could respond. Patricia Webb asked to meet me for coffee on Friday afternoon. Her voice on the phone had been strange, not just grieving, but worried, almost afraid. We met at a cafe in Lakewood, far from Christine's new temporary residence. Patricia looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen her, her face drawn, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. Grant, thank you for coming. Of course, I sat down across from her. What's going on, Patricia? Christine told me something. She hesitated, glancing around the cafe as if checking for eavesdroppers. About Neil. About why she got involved with him in the first place. I'm listening. He has a gambling problem. Serious. He owes money to people, not loan sharks exactly, but private gambling debts. She swallowed. Over $200,000. I felt something shift in my understanding. Go on. Christine says Neil pressured her to help him access your business accounts. Just temporarily, he said, to cover some of his debts. Patricia's voice cracked. She refused. That's why the affair went on so long. He kept pushing, kept manipulating, and she kept saying no to that one thing. So she drew the line at theft, but not adultery. Patricia flinched. I'm not defending her. I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to protect yourself. She leaned forward. Neil has nothing to lose now. His career is ruined. His father's cut him off. His debts are coming due. That makes him dangerous. I thought about the desperation in Neil's voice during our last call. The way he'd tried to blame Christine, then immediately pivoted to pleading. The calculations of a man running out of options. Who does he owe the money to? Someone named Kowalski, Vincent Kowalski. Patricia shook her head. I don't know anything else, just be careful, Grant. Please. I ran the name that evening. Vincent Kowalski, 52, owned several private card rooms around Denver. Not organized crime, at least nothing that had ever been proven, but not exactly legitimate either. The kind of businessman who operated in the gray areas, who extended credit to people who couldn't get it elsewhere, and who had ways of collecting that didn't involve courts or lawyers. I dealt with men like Kowalski in other contexts. They weren't complicated. They followed a simple logic. Money owed, money collected, by whatever means necessary. The question was whether Neil's debts would stay Neil's problem, or whether Kowalski might see an opportunity in the chaos. I upgraded my home security that weekend. Cameras, motion sensors, a better alarm system. I also briefed Rachel and the senior staff at Sentinel Shield, told them to report anything unusual. It felt strange, treating my own city like a potential combat zone. But I'd learned long ago that the difference between paranoia and prudence was usually determined by what happened next. The divorce proceedings began in earnest in late October. Christine had hired Derek Lawson, a lawyer known for aggressive tactics and creative arguments. His reputation preceded him. In legal circles, people called him the Pit Bull. The Pit Bull came out swinging. First argument, Christine had been emotionally coerced into signing the prenuptial agreement. Victor shut that down by producing records showing Christine had independent legal counsel at the time, counsel she'd chosen herself, who had advised her to sign. Your Honor, Lawson argued, his voice dripping with practiced sincerity, Mrs. Holloway was a young woman deeply in love, presented with a complex legal document by a man with significantly more resources and life experience. The power imbalance alone— Mr. Lawson, Victor interrupted smoothly, I have here a signed statement from Mrs. Andrea Burke, Mrs. Holloway's personal attorney at the time, confirming that she spent 4 hours reviewing the prenuptial agreement with her client, explained every clause in detail, and recommended several amendments, all of which Mr. Holloway agreed to. This was not coercion. This was due diligence. The judge made a note. Lawson's jaw tightened. Second argument. The infidelity clause was unconscionable and shouldn't be enforced. Victor cited 6 Colorado cases where similar clauses had been upheld, including one from just 3 years ago. Unconscionable clauses deprive one party of meaningful choice, Lawson argued. My client is facing potential destitution because of a single mistake. An 18-month mistake, Victor noted dryly, with documented evidence of premeditation, coordination, and active deception. If anything, Your Honor, the prenuptial agreement is remarkably lenient given the circumstances. Third argument, Grant's cold and neglectful behavior had contributed to the breakdown of the marriage and should mitigate Christine's culpability. That one almost made me laugh. Your Honor, Victor said at the hearing on November 5th, opposing counsel is attempting to argue that Mrs. Holloway's 18-month affair was somehow caused by my client's work schedule. This argument fails for 2 reasons. First, the prenuptial agreement makes no exceptions for emotional neglect, and Mrs. Holloway signed it with full knowledge of its terms. Second, and more importantly, the evidence shows that Mrs. Holloway made no attempt to address any supposed issues in the marriage before commencing her affair. No requests for counseling, no conversations about dissatisfaction. Simply a deliberate, sustained betrayal conducted with meticulous planning. Lawson tried to object, but the judge waved him off. I've heard enough. Judge Martinez, a silver-haired woman who'd seen every flavor of marital disaster, was not impressed by Derek Lawson's creativity. Prenuptial agreement is valid and enforceable. The infidelity clause is clear and was agreed to by both parties with appropriate legal counsel. Motion denied. I watched Christine's face fall when the ruling came down. Some part of me, a smaller part than I'd expected, felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered the photos from Aspen, the emails about Scottsdale, the 18 months of coordinated lies. The sympathy faded. Christine asked to meet me privately on November 8th, against her lawyer's advice. I agreed. Not because I wanted to see her, but because I wanted to understand. We met at a downtown coffee shop, neutral territory. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow, as if the past month had subtracted something essential from her. I know I destroyed everything. She couldn't quite meet my eyes. I'm not asking for the money. Keep it. I'm asking you not to leave me with nothing. I gave you 9 years. You gave me 8 years and then stole the 9th. The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. You want to know what those 9 years meant to me? Everything. I would have died for you. I built a life for us. And you traded it for a man who was using you to get to my company. I know, her voice cracked. I know what I did. Neil manipulated me. No. I leaned forward. You were a willing participant. You chose him every single day for 18 months. You don't get to be the victim now. She was crying again, soft tears tracking down her cheeks. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with ordinary conversations, ordinary lives, people who had no idea what kind of wreckage was sitting at the table by the window. I loved you, Grant. I still... Don't. I stood up. Don't say that. Don't cheapen whatever we had by pretending you still feel something after what you did. I left her sitting there, tears running down her face, with the check on the table. It was the last private conversation we would ever have. Neil signed the buyout papers on October 20th. He didn't have a choice. The $1.8 million would be paid over 18 months. I'd structured it deliberately, knowing he needed cash now to pay off Kowalski. This way, he'd get steady payments instead of a lump sum. Enough to survive, not enough to escape. 2 weeks later, Vincent Kowalski walked into my office. He didn't have an appointment. He didn't need one. The receptionist tried to stop him, but there's a certain type of man who doesn't stop for receptionists. And Kowalski was that type. Mr. Holloway. He settled into the chair across from my desk without being invited. Heavy-set, late 50s, with a Polish accent and the flat eyes of someone who'd seen things and done things and stopped being bothered by either. I understand you've recently parted ways with Neil Ashford. That's public knowledge. Mr. Ashford owes me money. Kowalski smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Considerable money. He's been creative in his explanations for why he cannot pay. That sounds like a personal problem. It becomes your problem when he tells me that his former business partner owes him money. That this, what is the word, buyout should have been larger. That you cheated him. I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not fear. I'd stopped feeling fear in Fallujah, or at least stopped letting it control me. Just recognition. Understanding. This was the moment Patricia had warned me about. Mr. Ashford is no longer associated with my company. His debts are his own. I kept my voice level. The buyout was fair market value, assessed by independent evaluators. If Neil told you otherwise, he's lying. He's been lying to a lot of people lately. Kowalski studied me, tilting his head slightly. You are not afraid. Should I be? Most men in your position would be. He leaned forward. I deal with many men who owe me money, Mr. Holloway. Some of them try to run, some of them try to hide, some of them try to fight. You are none of these things. You are sitting there like you're waiting for something. If you're here to threaten me, I should tell you. I've dealt with people far more dangerous than you in places far less pleasant than Denver. This conversation is being recorded. I gestured to the camera in the corner of my office. Leave my office. A long pause stretched between us. Kowalski's eyes moved over my face, reading something there, calculating something. You have killed men, he said finally. It wasn't a question. I've served my country. That is not what I asked. He nodded slowly, almost approvingly. I know soldiers. I grew up in Krakow during the bad times. I know the look. He stood, brushing off his coat. Mr. Ashford misrepresented the situation. He does that often, I am learning. My apologies for the intrusion. He extended his hand. I didn't take it. Fair enough, Mr. Holloway. Good luck. He left. I called the police immediately and filed a report. Paper trail, documentation. The same instincts that had kept me alive in combat. The divorce was finalized on December 10th. Brief hearing. Papers signed. A marriage of 9 years dissolved in 15 minutes. Final settlement. Christine received her personal belongings, the Lexus, and $25,000 in cash. No spousal support. No claim to business assets. Less than 5% of what we'd built together. She didn't look at me as she signed the papers. I didn't try to catch her eye. Outside the courthouse, she stopped me one last time. Grant. Her voice was barely audible. I am sorry, for what it's worth. I looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time since that Tuesday in October. She was thinner, paler. The spark that had drawn me to her at that charity gala 11 years ago was gone, replaced by something hollow. It's worth exactly what you gave our marriage, I said. Nothing. I walked away. I didn't look back. December disappeared into January. The holidays passed in a blur of work and solitude. I spent Christmas Day at the office, catching up on proposals and contracts. Rachel had offered to stay with me. Nobody should work alone on Christmas, she'd said, but I'd sent her home to her family. This was something I needed to do myself. The office was quiet, the way buildings get when they're empty of people. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, looking at the city lights through the window. Denver was beautiful at night, all glittering towers and distant mountains, but I couldn't feel it. Couldn't feel much of anything except a kind of numb determination to keep moving forward. New Year's Eve found me in my empty house, watching the fireworks over Denver from my bedroom window. The bedroom I'd finally managed to sleep in again, though I'd replaced the mattress and the sheets. The old ones were gone, thrown out the same day the movers took Christine's things. Some things can't be cleaned. I poured myself a bourbon at midnight, raised a silent toast to no one in particular, and went to bed. The next year would be better. It had to be. Neil Ashford left Denver on December 15th, bound for Phoenix, where his mother lived. His father had cut him off entirely. Douglas told me as much when we finalized the last of the buyout paperwork. He made his choices, Douglas had said, his voice heavy with something that might have been grief. Now he has to live with them. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. The last I heard from Ashley, Neil was working as a security guard at a mall in Tempe, the only job he could get with his reputation in tatters. The man who'd bragged about taking my company by Christmas was standing in a uniform, checking IDs and watching for shoplifters. There's a word for that. Justice, maybe? Or karma. I didn't much care what you called it. Christine moved to Boulder, into a small apartment near the university. Her interior design business had collapsed. Too many of her clients had been connected to me, and they'd quietly distanced themselves. Word had spread, as it always does. She took a job as a showroom assistant at a furniture store. Minimum wage plus commission. Patricia called me once, in early January to let me know Christine was struggling but surviving. She doesn't blame you, Patricia said. She blames herself. I think that's progress. I hope so, I said. For her sake. I won the government contract on January 15th. $4.2 million over 3 years. Sentinel Shield was now the premier security consulting firm in the Rocky Mountain region. I stood in my office after the announcement, looking out at the Denver skyline. Rachel Torres found me there an hour later. Congratulations, boss. You earned this. We earned this, all of us. I turned to face her. Schedule a bonus for every employee. They stuck with me through everything. Done? She paused at the door. And what about you? When do you get to celebrate? I considered the question. I don't know yet. Ask me in a year. 3 days later, I received a letter from a law firm in Phoenix. Neil Ashford was suing me for defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He wanted $5 million. Christine had provided a sworn statement supporting his claims. Her statement alleged that I was emotionally abusive during our marriage and had vindictively pursued Neil's destruction after discovering the affair. I read the complaint 3 times, then called Victor. How do we bury this? With the truth. Victor's voice was sharp with anticipation. Discovery will be their nightmare, not ours. They have no idea what you have documented. What's the timeline? We file a countersuit within the week. Against Neil. Breach of fiduciary duty. Misappropriation of corporate funds. Conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. Against Christine, perjury, if her statements in the lawsuit contradict her statements in the divorce. And the exposure. We provide all documentation to Neil's attorneys. Everything. Make it clear what will come out in discovery. I could hear Victor's smile through the phone. The photos, the Meridian partnership documents, the financial theft records, his gambling debts, Kowalski, every dirty little secret you've uncovered. They'll know we're not bluffing. More than that, they'll know that going to trial means everything becomes public record. Neil's new employers, whoever they might be, will see it. His family will see it. Every potential employer for the rest of his life will be able to find it with a simple search. I thought about it. About Neil in that courtroom, watching his secrets laid out for the world to see. About Christine, realizing too late that she'd hitched her wagon to a sinking ship. Do it. We filed the countersuit the following Wednesday. Against Neil, breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of corporate funds, conspiracy to commit corporate espionage. Against Christine, perjury, if her statements in the lawsuit contradicted her statements in the divorce. More importantly, we provided all documentation to Neil's attorneys. Everything. The photos from Aspen and Cabo, the Meridian partnership documents, the financial theft records, Neil's gambling debts, his association with Vincent Kowalski. The message was clear. If this goes to trial, everything becomes public record. Neil's attorneys reviewed the documentation and advised him to drop the lawsuit immediately. They were experienced enough to recognize a disaster when they saw one. Neil refused. He was desperate now, irrational, convinced that he could still salvage something from the wreckage of his life. He'd lost his career, his income, his family connections. The lawsuit was his last play, his final gamble. But Christine was smarter than that. 2 days before the countersuit deadline, she withdrew her statement. More than that, she provided a new declaration admitting she had been pressured by Neil Ashford to provide false testimony and apologizing to the court for her initial cooperation. The lawsuit collapsed overnight. Neil, facing potential criminal charges for subornation of perjury on top of everything else, finally accepted reality. He dropped the suit, agreed to pay my legal fees, and disappeared back into whatever life he was building in Phoenix. I heard later that Kowalski's collectors caught up with him. 2 weeks in the hospital. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make a point. I didn't feel sorry for him. Christine called me one last time in late February. I almost didn't answer. Something made me pick up. I know you'll never forgive me. Her voice was steady now, calmer than I'd heard it in months. I don't expect you to, but I want you to know. I finally see Neil for what he is, for what he always was. That would have been useful information 18 months ago. I know. I was weak. I was selfish. She paused. And I destroyed the best thing in my life. I have to live with that. Yes. I didn't soften my voice. You do. Silence stretched between us, filled with the ghosts of the life we'd built and lost. Goodbye, Grant. Goodbye, Christine. I hung up. 1 year. That's what I told Rachel when she asked me when I'd celebrate. Exactly 1 year after I walked into my bedroom and found my life shattered, I sat on the deck of a cabin in Estes Park. I'd bought the place 6 months earlier, a retreat from the city and its memories. The mountains stretched out before me, snow-capped and indifferent, as the sun dropped toward the horizon. I wasn't the same man who'd stood in that doorway. I was harder in some ways, clearer in others. The things I'd lost, trust, innocence, the ability to believe in people without reservation, weren't coming back. But I'd gained something too. A certainty about who I was and what I could survive. Sentinel Shield had grown 40% in the past year. I'd hired 3 new senior consultants, all veterans. The government contract had led to 2 more. The business I'd built was thriving, stronger than it had ever been. And there was Emma. Dr. Emma Patterson, 35 years old, trauma psychologist specializing in veterans. We'd met when she consulted on a Sentinel Shield contract, helping us develop protocols for personnel who'd seen combat. She was smart, grounded, with a laugh that caught me off guard the first time I heard it. We'd been dating for 3 months, cautiously, slowly. Neither of us was in a hurry to make mistakes. I picked up my phone and dialed her number. Hey, her voice was warm. I thought you were staying up there through Sunday. I was, but I'm thinking about coming back to Denver early. I watched the last light fade from the peaks. You want to grab dinner tomorrow? I'd like that. Good. I'll text you when I'm back in town. Grant? She paused. Are you okay? You sound different. I thought about it, about everything I'd been through, everything I'd lost and rebuilt and learned. Yeah, I said. I think I am. I hung up and watched the stars come out over the mountains. Tomorrow I'd drive back to Denver, back to my company and my new life and whatever came next. But tonight, I sat in the gathering darkness and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet. But something close to hope.